How do you know when a writer is holding back? So let's say I bring to you what I think is a traumatic scene, and you read it and you say, yeah, it sounds traumatic, but I'm not like, it's missing, something's missing here.
When they write more about, okay, so when they write more about the other person in the scene than them, that's how I know they're holding back. They're not talking about themselves. They're taking that other person's inventory, and it's more about that other person. So I'll say, well, this isn't a book about that person. How did you feel in that situation? That's a number one example. You can actually see it before they even start writing the book. Typically, a client will come to me. This isn't, I don't mean typically, in this situation, this is how it unfolds. I've got all this other writing that I've done, and I'd love for you to read it all because I think I want to include it all in the book. And I'll go, well, how much of it is there? And they'll say, well, I mean, it's like a couple short stories I wrote. I think there might be some nuggets in there. And I think, oh, we're never going to use any of this. But I think, well, I'll read it, right? Because I'm getting to know them, and it's almost like part of the process because they're saying to me, this is who I was before I came to you. Will you look at me, right? So they are actually giving me an opportunity to see where they're going to have to go from. And I'll read the material and I'll glean from it, they're this kind of writer, or this is what's been important to them. We never use that material because I see that they're going to I get a good idea. I'm like, okay, I understand where they're starting from. I understand why they're coming to me. I understand why they're showing me this. They're saying, and a lot of times the material will have pretty graphics in it, and they've spent a lot of time presenting it. When they write books with me, I'm like, do not put any graphics in the book while we're writing it. It's just something we have to delete and move around. It's technical stuff. Words, just words. Dressing it up is not going to change my edit notes. Like you're not going to fool me with the pictures, right? And so that's one way that I see that they might be a little more resistant to being honest. I had a client once who wrote an entire book with me for 2 drafts. And it was at the end of the second draft. I don't know if I missed it or she just threw it in, kind of slid it in. But I read it and I realized that something had happened to her as a baby in a crib. It was abuse. And she hadn't even realized, and she didn't even realize she'd written it. And that was painful. It was hard to call it out, and it was hard for her to process it. So I think if you want to tell, it'll come out.
Right. Whether you know it or not.
Whether you know it or not.
The words they don't lie.
They'll be the truth. It's like Freudian slips.
Very true. How common is it for a writer to not believe in themselves?
I mean, does anybody ever really believe in themselves that is a writer? I mean, I have days. I think it varies from day to day. I think that one thing I've been doing lately is I'm part of a writing group, and we will write and read out loud, and nobody will say anything. You just read, and it's thank you. And then another part of that group, which is more an advanced group, we will read a chapter and then the group will comment on it. And I think that takes away, when you're able to present and perform, you get out of that headspace that I'm all alone. And on any given day, it's all about me. I'm either good or I'm bad. Good or bad. It's hardly ever, well, that was a good day. It's never in the middle. I think as a writer, you're either shit or you're amazing. So when you are in a group and you're reading to other people, you realize that there's a lot of good things about your writing. There's some things that need to be fixed about your writing. Oh, I didn't expect that person would like that. Oh, I really like how I sounded. Oh, wow, I'm writing about all these. Gosh, I keep using that voice. Wow, I'm really snarky. There's so many other things to think about versus good or bad. And that's where I try to get writers to work from. Like, what are your strengths? What are some of the areas you could improve? If that's not something you're very interested in getting better, then maybe we'll have someone come in and do maybe like some edits on that for you. Or, but rarely does anyone say, oh, I'm not a good writer. I think they're pretty proud of themselves by the time they get through 3 drafts. If anything, they're very proud of the work they just did week after week, the vigilance and the resiliency, no matter what, to sit down at that computer and write a chapter, even if it's something they want to just throw against the wall in absolute disgust. I've had them turn in chapters and say, well, I'm turning it in, ... You're like, the rest of that sentence is, but I think it's terrible. And it never is.
What about the flip side? Those that think it's amazing and actually maybe they're not seeing themselves in, they're blinded by something.
That's a great question. I do know experience. I have had experiences like that where they're on a journey and you can just be their guide. So you can tell that a lot of what they're writing probably belongs in a journal and might need some more extensive therapy before it goes out in the world. It's definitely a little bit of a dump, maybe a little bit of a shit show. But that's not I'm not going to judge their experience. So if they're done with it and they say, and I might say, this felt a little hard. Are you sure you want to come out and say that about like your mom or that ex-husband? Or like, I know we're going to change some names, but that's, whoa, that's really, you're going for the jugular on that one. I know. That's who they're going to be. And I am, hats off to you. Like I've given the disclaimer, because what will happen is that they'll go out and try to sell the book. And a lot of times with a little bit of my guidance, depending on whether they're still coaching with me or not, but they'll go out and I've become friends with most of these people at this point. So I have a lot invested emotionally with them, but they'll find out sooner or later because someone will say, this feels like an emotional dump. And then they'll have to go, maybe I should like get rid of that one scene with the, and some people need more of a rewrite and they don't have time or money anymore to do a rewrite. So they might have to sit on it for a while.
So if it feels really heavy, if I'm like, whoa, I'm not moved, but this is almost like uncomfortable for me, then maybe it is this dump. Is that how?
Yeah, it's not really for the reader. It's for the writer still. And you want to get it to a place where it's for the reader to then have their experience and feel like, I just heard someone say that like Angela's Ashes, he wrote that for 10 years or something because he wanted to write it until he wasn't angry anymore so that the experience could be for the reader.
What is your process for coaching belief into someone?
Well, I always just say the fact that they signed up for a 1-year program and they're showing up every week is already pretty amazing and really impressive. I'm always giving like positive notes, like love or that was amazing, or look how you turned that around, or this is incredible. In my 1-year program, there isn't a lot of time to not believe in yourself. It's so rigorous and it's so continual that I don't really think it's belief that trips them up. Because once they start getting going, they just want to do the work and finish it because they're committed. I think belief falls more into people that aren't there yet, right? So that would be more in the Own Your Authorship class. That's people who, it's a lot more like cheerleading and a lot more showing them the light of the vision that they have, that they can get to the finish line, that they are worthy of writing, that they can have that desire as much as anybody else can have that desire. So there's a lot more coaching belief in, I would say, in those early foundational and fundamental classes. But my 1-year clients, they're pretty badass. They signing up for a 1-year program and putting out $20,000, you already better believe because you're invested.
Does anyone get scared because they know people will read it and they may identify, even though names are changed and think, but they're just afraid, even,
Yeah.
it's traumatic to divulge secrets?
I've had clients sit on their books for a little bit longer than I thought they should have, but that was their process that they needed to go through. And then when they did actually release the book, they were ready. And so they're ready, when they're ready. Or they had to the book had shown them something about themselves. And so they had to go be with that new self for a little while and then maybe start a podcast or open another version of their business. And they knew the book was good. So that's not like it was getting stale. They knew that they could bring it out when they felt like they were in a successful space. And so sometimes that might be 6 months after they're done. After a year, I start to hassle them. What happened to your book? What happened to your book? What happened to your book? And some people, it doesn't happen much anymore, but in my early days of coaching, there were people that wrote the book just to write the book. They were done. They were like, I'm good. Something I wanted to do in retirement. I don't really think I have time and energy to go through the whole publishing process. I'm really happy I did it. I feel like I wanted it down on paper for legacy. And I just don't think I need to publish it.
Sometimes I've seen comments that when someone's written about, let's say, a famous parent, that whatever the public's perception of that individual is, they end up getting mad at the writer because maybe they're divulging things that we don't want to see that side of that person.
Right.
Have you ever talked about, the criticism that could come for divulging secrets or speaking about whatever that
Oh, yeah.
isn't seen as honoring whomever?
I like to say if you're getting that kind of criticism, you're doing well with your book because nobody criticizes a book nobody cares about. So I believe to get that level of criticism, you have to have a lot of eyeballs on your book. A lot of eyeballs on your book to kind of kick up that kind of, dissent about it, right? That many people have to be reading it. So I look at that as kind of a win. It's like, good, they're fired up. Tell more people to read it because they're going to be fired up and they're going to be upset. And I haven't had anybody write about anybody famous. I do have a client who wrote about there were Hollywood people in it. She hasn't published yet. But she was like, that's the way it went down. And I was there. So it's not like contestable really, because it's exactly what happened. And there were witnesses. So, we don't in general, our bubbles burst. If that's the bubble that's going to be burst for you and you chose that book to read it, maybe you were looking to get that bubble burst anyway. You just don't know it on a subconscious level.